we've already done some of this work. So these are the objectives for the overall lecture series. And first is understand the process. We did that in session 1. Think about your clinical question. We did that in session 2. And now today we're on thinking about how you're going to go about searching the literature based on your clinical question. So that's what we're going to focus on today. I'm going to give you some tips and tools again that you can use. I am basically approaching this workshop from the philosophy of if I teach a man to fish, he can do it. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to fish and how to do this literature review. Nobody will be able to do it for you, so you have to learn the process, okay? And then you'll be able to apply the process to any literature review that you do in the future, hopefully. So keep this information with you. So we're going to go down here a little bit. These are things we've already covered, but there was something I wanted to review here. Again, this is our process, okay? So we're going a little slowly at the beginning. We did our questions. Today we're doing search strategy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about step 3, which is how to identify the relevant literature. After that, that's where the real work will begin, where you will be really screening and sorting your literature over the next couple of weeks, okay? So if you remember, in this first session, this is where you should be. So I just am giving you this little mini review here. Most of you have been to all 3 sessions, I know, so that's good. But remember, in the first session, we said you're going to write your plan. So this is the PRISMA P guidelines up here. And so we talked about in the first couple of weeks after the first session where you would write your protocol for your systematic review paper. Okay? So this is just reminding you that hopefully you have a protocol written, usually a 3-page document answering these 17 questions about your plan to write your systematic review. So that was session 1. And then we talked about registering your plan with Prospero. That's an important step too because it gives you 2 pieces of information. I want to remind you about that. One is it tells you if someone else is writing a review just like yours, which is not good because then you don't want to write that one. These are registered prospectively. People get in and register when they're planning to write one. You don't want to duplicate someone else's work, okay? And the second one is it really helps you to move forward and it makes your plan transparent to potential publishers that you're writing this review and it'll be coming to a journal. Okay, and then we talked about making that commitment. So then for part 2, it was about your clinical question. I'm going to go down through here a little bit. And I gave you some tools to write that question and templates at the end, if you remember. And at least one of you said they did come today with a question. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to move forward here. We're going to talk about devising your search strategy. I'm going to give you the tools of the library. I may even go to some of the library sites today at the end. And if we have time, I'm glad to help you practice searching a little bit before you leave today. Okay. So, all right. So today's objectives. We're going to talk about how to set that inclusion, exclusion criteria for a systematic review. Okay, what articles you're including, what articles you're not including, and why. That's going to be, it's an integral part of your plan, and we need to know that. We're going to talk about developing the strategy, using keywords and how you're defining those words in those library databases, and then you're going to learn today about some of these databases and decide which databases you should choose to include in your review. Okay. So, when you think about devising your search strategy, some things to remember. The hallmark of a systematic review, a rigorous systematic review, is that you have all of the evidence related to your clinical question to answer that question, all of it. So that's number 1. We want to remember that. You want to think about meeting with your librarian. I'm going to show you a tool I developed here with one of our librarians for my clinical doctoral students. And anybody can use that website. It's going to be on the slide here. And then consider chatting or meeting with your librarian as you move forward to plan your search. They're very helpful, and that's what they're there for, and it's part of what they do at our library is help people find research articles. If you're doing a nursing or health related study, to me these are the minimum databases you should include. Unfortunately, our library, we can't get to MBase right now, so I don't think you'll be able to use that one, but these others you should consider using. You just expect there's going to be duplicates. That's something very frustrating for students. Is like, well, I keep searching and I get all these duplicates. Yes, you will. You're going to have to sort that out. And then remember to think about searching the gray literature too, like dissertations people have just completed, those kinds of documents are new current information that you could include in your review. Okay. Always, 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 after Prospero, search for those past reviews too. What's been published recently that is a review that's similar to what you're writing. And that would be in Cochrane and the Joanna Briggs Institute. Okay, so there's different approaches when you're searching in these bibliographic databases. That's really what they are. Medline, PubMed, CINAHL, Ovid, PsycInfo, PsycArticles, all those, Sports Discus I know you said you're going to use. They are really bibliographic databases, right? They're giant databases of articles. So you can use an ancestry approach. This is where you might go back and use references cited in relevant studies to find other earlier work, okay? You could use a descendancy approach, where you say this is the key study, and then that's a little more pivotal, and then you search forward from that. You could get into that gray literature, and then remember, to own the literature, you just have to continue to study it and really consider using all three approaches at some point, okay? So there's millions and millions of articles. It can get very overwhelming. That's why we talked before, I think in the first session, we had a question at the end about being buried in the literature and how to manage that. The way that you manage that is with a refined clinical question and very tight inclusion and exclusion criteria. Otherwise, it is likely that if you're doing a topic that's been studied a lot, you'll be potentially buried in literature. So I want you to know when you're searching these databases that the articles are coded for different things. So like Medline puts articles in there coded for language, subject matter, journal type, and there's many more criteria as well. So there are ways the articles are entered, and then knowing that, you can figure out how to retrieve the articles you want. Okay, so these are direct links to Academic Search Complete, EBSCOhost, or EBSCOhost through Academic Search Complete, or EBSCOhost. I'm going to do some examples at the end here, but this is how I tend to search, so I wanted to put the links in here for you. Okay, and I'll demonstrate that to you here in a little bit. So if you're a health researcher, these are the key electronic databases to consider. There are many, many, many more, though. The library has a little synopsis on each database and what is included in that database. Sometimes I would tell you, don't go with your intuition on this. Like, don't go to the library site and click on the database tab and then click on databases by subject and then click on a database and think the name of the database sounds good and it should be something you would include. That is not a correct approach, okay? Go to the list of databases at the library, and there's a paragraph about each database that tells you what's included in that database. You know, inform yourself a little bit more about what types of articles are included. The names are not always reflective of the type of literature that's included in the database, okay? So there's some, like, for example, called Health Source Consumer or Health Source different things. Those are really consumer-related articles that are for a different audience and things like that. So you want to really read a little bit about the databases you're including so you're really well informed about the kind of articles you might retrieve when you're doing your search. So this is what I'm saying. Familiarize yourself with the database first. I'm going to give you information on several of these key databases today, the library, and then watch a tutorial also about the searching program. Most of the databases like PubMed, Medline, CINAHL have tutorials, and they give you more information so you can do a more refined search. Okay. So this is a library guide that I worked with Virginia at our library. I'm going to see if I can open it for you. For my clinical doctoral class. This was a new class last semester, and it is Nursing 707, but really this information on this library resource page is not specific to nursing. It is specific to systematic reviews. Okay, so this might be a resource for you. Virginia really worked hard on this with me to include a lot of information for students who are in the process of writing a systematic review. And a lot of what you're learning in this workshop, you will see, is redundant with this page, but it's nice to have a resource. So here, if you're logging on, if you're on campus, off campus, Here's instructions specifically on how to use some certain databases and tools. This is the librarian here who helped me develop it, and there's a link to email her on this page if you need help with your systematic review. Okay. She did give us a link here to some online tutorials as well. And then she's also added some instruction we asked her to for our students on how to use a reference managing system like EndNote, which I use. I prefer EndNote, but you don't have to use EndNote. It does cost a little bit. Or Mendeley, which is free. I think some of our students are using Mendeley. There's also a page for making your question, so just reminders about how to write your clinical question, and she did put some templates up as well, okay? And then just the general information on systematic review. So this is a great resource for you as you go through the process, and I probably should have her just take that off for Nursing 707. It's really not specific to nursing. Okay. And then if you need individualized help, this is another link at the library that you can follow and get that individualized help. I have found that to be tremendously helpful. The library really stepped up for me last semester. They helped all 50 of my students. They were great about it. And the students are distance students, many of them, so they got online. And this little Ask a Librarian tab over here, like this Ask a Librarian tab over here, like you can just click there and they'll just start chatting with you right then. So it's really convenient and really nice service. Okay. So it is very important to document your literature retrieval process, all right? And that's important because remember in the last session we talked about that figure that you're going to want to put at the end of your literature review that shows how you did your search. In the methods section of your systematic review paper, you're going to write about what databases you chose, what words you searched, how you classified those words, were they subject terms or not, and then how many articles you retrieved and why you eliminated articles. And that'll be in that figure. But so it's really important to document your search for that reason. So you can, through EBSCOhost, it will help you to track your searches as you adapt them, and I can show you that here in a little bit. But you just want to be able to really well describe how you conducted the search in your paper. Okay. You can keep your search current. If this is a topic that you're super passionate about and you want to stay up to date on the literature, you can set up alerts for yourself with the really simple syndication feeds. So you'll get notification when there's like a new article that would come up under your search, okay? And you can also do referrals for current contents, which is a web-based current awareness database. Okay, so those are very helpful when you're trying to stay up to date on a topic that you're studying, particularly if you're a graduate student and you plan to pursue it in a project. So again, record your strategies, set up a spreadsheet to track it as well, or print and save your EBSCOhost searching. So before I do some examples of searching and more about the databases, I wanted to tell you to be careful with these Boolean operators. In all these databases, you can choose to use and, or not. They're the most widely used operators. These expand or limit your search, okay, and delimit your search. The software only finds records that includes both terms if you're searching with two terms, or expands it because it can have either or, and not narrows your search. Okay, and there's an example there about loneliness, not pregnancy. That will retrieve records with loneliness, but not anything on pregnancy. So you can do things like that. Okay, each of the databases, and this is why you definitely want to familiarize yourself with the databases, have truncation symbols, and these can be very helpful tools if you know what they are. So, for example, you can use an asterisk to expand a root word. So you might put in lonely with an asterisk, and it'll find articles that have all the other words associated with loneliness, like lonelier, loneliest, things like that. So it's good to know, depending on the database you're searching, if there are truncation symbols that you can use to help you find the literature you're looking for. There's also wildcard symbols that do things like if a word can be spelled two ways, you can use a wildcard symbol to retrieve. I gave an example here with behavior. You can search the word behavior, and if you search it like this, it'll capture both spellings. Okay. The takeaway message is these truncation symbols are not the same for every database that you're searching, and so you do need to know what's appropriate for each one. So I'm going to cover some of the basic databases that I said are important for healthcare research so that you are a little more familiar with what's in there. So CINAHL, this is one used widely by nursing and allied health. Journals, books, dissertations, and conference proceedings. So you can get abstracts that were presented at recent conferences from CINAHL as well. It's offered through EBSCOhost. It's vast, 3 million records, dates back to the 1980s, and you can fine-tune it with an advanced search technique. Okay. PubMed. This is the National Library of Medicine's gateway to Medline. And so it's developed by the National Library. It's thousands and thousands of journals, millions of records since the 1940s. It's free, and it does use a controlled vocabulary of mesh subject headings. So I can show you that today too when we do some practice searching about those subject headings. It doesn't do you any good. You don't want to just intuit the word you should search. Okay, you want to go to these dictionaries or subject heading dictionaries associated with the database and find out what word you should be using to find the articles you want, because often people think, students will think, well, I'm researching this topic, this is the word I should use, but that might not be an approved word in the MESH dictionary. So you might be missing articles or not finding what you want to find. Okay, and I will give you an example of how to click on that MESH database and find those terms. Google Scholar is a little controversial, but widely used. The one thing about Google Scholar is it can tell you who is deep in the current work on a topic. And you know, I know I have a Google Scholar profile on loneliness. People have Scholar profiles on their main topic of interest, and it will show all of your publications from that author. So if you identify a person who's key to your work, you know, viewing their Google Scholar profile could be helpful to you as well. You might find other related work that way. It's free, and you can search by topic, title, or author, and you can also use these operators in Google Scholar. Health Source Nursing Academic. I know I've got 4 nursing faculty here, so I'm going to say it's 550 full-text journals, abstracts, and indexing for 850. And it's strong on nursing, but does have other literature as well. So something to consider. The Web of Knowledge. This is a little bit different. It incorporates research reports from many disciplines, and it's based off the citation indexes from the Science Citation Index, Social Science Citation Index, and the Arts and Humanities. But it's an interesting place to search. You often get some different articles compared to what you may get in other places. PsycInfo. PsycInfo has millions of references. This is the really key database for psychology. If you're searching for psychological literature or psychiatric literature, it's been since 1872. It's multilingual, so offers literature in over 35 languages, and it's pretty comprehensive for psychology and psychiatric articles. If you have a psych articles is a little bit different. When you get PsycInfo is the one you probably want to search, but it doesn't have everything in full text. If you're looking for psychological literature, you could also pick PsycArticles. PsycArticles has psychological literature that's available in full text. So that's the main difference there, but it's not as comprehensive. Okay. Sports Discus is, I know we have at least one of our sports or phys ed people here. This is full coverage of sport, fitness, and related discipline articles. So over 600,000 records, and it's international and multidisciplinary. Social work abstracts is the thing I often search, even though I'm from nursing, because I think I'm always surprised at the literature I find going on in social work that relates to my work. So we want to think about that too when you're doing a comprehensive search strategy. Think about what other disciplines might be studying this same phenomenon. It's important because I tend to analyze literature in a multifaceted way. I think it's important to know the disciplinary perspective of the person writing about your topic, because nursing approaches things different from medicine, different from social work, different from psychology. And it's also important to know the country that the study's taking place in, right? So, because healthcare systems vary by country. And so when I look at literature, I like to look at what the findings are, but I always look and say, okay, who's writing this paper? What is their disciplinary perspective? Because that often tells me, like, maybe why they picked the measures they picked, or why they picked the method they picked. You know, it may be because of their disciplinary perspective, but it could still add to my work and add to my knowledge if I read that article. So it's important to be inclusive in that way. Okay, so after you have completed your literature search, you're going to begin the process of looking at what's out there and screening your sources for relevance and appropriateness, okay? So you want to know your inclusion-exclusion criteria, and those criteria come from your clinical question. This is where I see people often getting stuck, is trying to decide what to include. So you want to think about, when we talked the last time, we talked about your PICO question. Are you going to limit by time, by method? You know, those are all part of your inclusion-exclusion criteria. So just thinking along those lines. I often will limit by method. I never limit by time. I think we talked about that before. I do often limit by population because I think that many of the things that we study vary, for example, by age of the study sample. Me studying a phenomenon in children is not the same as me studying a phenomenon in an older adult. So I often will say I'm only going to write a review of the quantitative studies of older adults. Or if I'm looking to figure out if there are interventions available, I might limit it to say I'm only going to write a review of intervention studies. Sometimes I'll say I'm only going to write a review of studies that have a comparator. So those are all ways that you can limit. You can limit by English language. And in today's world, though, you often don't have to do that. You know, you can get things translated. If there's an article from another country that's in a different language that you think is important for your work, I would encourage you to think about getting that article translated rather than going down through all your databases and limiting to English language only because that's your current language that you can read. Because we can get some things translated. So, and oftentimes, even if it's in a different language, they'll at least give you the abstract in English so that you can try to figure out if it's something you want to read. Okay. Okay. And then when you're selecting your articles, you're going to read all these abstracts and select. If you can't make a decision based on the abstract, if it should be included or not, then you have to retrieve the article, read the article to make that decision if it meets or doesn't meet your inclusion-exclusion criteria. And then I think what we're going to do now is, these are services through the library again. You know, they'll help you screen, they'll help you get your articles. You can order interlibrary loan. I ordered an article. They are so fast on that. This morning I'm writing the SLIT review and I ordered an article at like 10:30 and it's already in my email that it's there. So it's pretty quick. It's not like a long wait. So you don't want to limit to only articles you can get on full text here in our library because that Iliad system is fantastic for getting articles quickly. And then this is, I just was giving you my little tip here on, this is how I save my articles. I save PDF copies of all the articles included in a review in the file for that review, and this is how I save it. I save it by first author, last name, year, and journal, and even sometimes I'll add a word from the title. So so that I can always find it, because in your EndNote databases, the articles are ordered by author, so it's good to save them that way. And you can actually then upload those PDFs into your reference managing system as you do the paper if you have time. And then it's pretty good because when you go to cite the reference in your paper, if you need to reread the article again, it's right there in EndNote. It's attached there. Okay, and I'm giving you this a little bit early. This is a document I use sometimes, something similar to this when I'm critiquing literature, because you want to, when you're reading these articles and critiquing, I'll often start critiquing them and fill in some of these things just with little notes, because a lot of what we do is electronic, but just with little notes so I know what to say about this article in my paper when I'm writing my paper. So, and I can give you all these slides. I didn't get them printed before the talk today, but I can give you these slides. But those are the slides for today. And then I think we're going to have another session where we talk about actually the other steps in this finalizing your process. But what I'm going to do now is I think I will go to the library site, and I know we have at least one question. I can do some examples of searching and finding those subject terms if you would like to see that. Let me talk to the tech guy. If I go off of the PowerPoints, will it still record? I don't know. I'm not going to go off of them then. I'm just going to ignore that right now. Okay. So I'll say no thanks to the library. Okay, so this is how I usually, I'll just give you an example of how I usually do a search so that you can just have something to go by. So I usually go to the library site, and this is the main library site for WVU. And then I always go database. For me, it's easier to go databases by subject just because I know the links. And I always go to A, and I go through Academic Search Complete because it takes me to EBSCOhost, which is where I can then choose all of my databases. Okay, so EBSCOhost is also the place where you can find your subject terms. So for those of you searching Medline, you have to choose the database first. So I'm going to choose those databases. So what I will do is I will go down and I will choose Medline, and I will choose CINAHL, and I'll pick a few here, Psych Info. Okay. So right here, if you need the summary, is where the information is about what's in each database. Okay? So it's pretty easy. If you're questioning yourself and saying, should I include this database, you know, go over here, read this, make a decision about whether or not you should include it in your search. Okay. All right. Then I'm going to do an advanced search, and let's say here I want to search. Do you want to do yours, Kayla? Okay. Okay. If not, I can just do an example. Okay. So I'm going to say I get in here and I'm like, I want to search loneliness. Well, if I can type, I'll do it. Okay. But like these other things that fall up underneath it here, loneliness in the elderly, loneliness, social isolation, all those things that are coming up, those are things that people have searched, and I can see that, but those are not approved subject terms. Okay, so that's people just exploring the literature and trying to find articles they want without going by these approved subject terms, okay? So if we're going to search loneliness, and then I say to myself, well, I wonder if that's a subject term. I go here, okay? And then if I'm searching all three of these databases, so I would want to know, is it a subject term, let's say in Medline? Is it a mesh term? So you can go here and you can put in loneliness and check. Okay, and I want the relevancy ranked results. So it is, loneliness is a subject term. So do this, and so then I know I'm in pretty good shape here. I can do that, okay? And then I'll go back. But if I want to put in loneliness and, which I'm saying it would have to have both terms, first I would select here loneliness as a subject term then, because it's an approved subject term, so I only want articles that have been classified in these three databases with loneliness as a subject term. That's going to really help me to limit my search, because if I just put in the word loneliness and pick any field where it says select a field, if I just leave it, it'll pick up articles that just have loneliness in the text. Because these things, also if it's full text articles available, it'll search the text. So I'll just start getting all kinds of things, you know, so I've got to know the subject terms. And then here, let's say we want to search depression. So again, I'm trying to, if I can find a good one, I'll illustrate it for you. Depression, the subject terms, it is a subject term, but then you can see all the other potential subject terms that I could potentially use. Like we're getting ready to do a study on postpartum depression. So if I was doing that lit review, I would pick depression, comma, postpartum. And I would write it exactly that way so that I was getting the articles as they are classified in the databases. Okay. All right. Okay. So I don't tend to limit by population up here in the top, because I'm going to show you how we're going to do that here in a minute, okay? So now I'm saying they're both approved subject terms, so I'm going to search only for articles that have loneliness and depression, and they've been classified in that way by subject terms in Medline. So that's pretty limiting. That'll be pretty limiting. That'll be good. I will still get a lot of articles. Okay, so now I've got 2,000 articles, and then I have to go by my inclusion-exclusion criteria to see what I want to include. So this is where you can limit by population, if you see it over here on the side. So first of all, I do always pick scholarly peer-reviewed journals because that's what I'm interested in when I'm writing a systematic review. Remember we said sort of garbage in, garbage out? Okay, so you can see that took us down quite a bit, right, just by limiting to scholarly peer-reviewed. Then I will go down and I will say, okay, I probably will limit by age, and that's something we can do. But down here are all the tools where you can also limit by method, limit by language, limit by population. There's all these different limits that you can set. For me, I like to limit by age, and I will limit, in the current paper I'm doing, it's older adults. Older adults in the United States are classified as adults 65 and older. So I would pick that one. Now I've gone from 20-some hundred articles, 2,000-some articles, to 256 potential abstracts. Then I'm probably going to read them all, to be honest with you. I'm probably going to read all those abstracts. Because I don't like to set too many limits. I don't want to miss an article I should include. So for me, if I were writing this paper, I would then go to the Page Option tab, and I would pick a detailed view. And I will now have 256 abstracts to read. Okay, and I will look at those abstracts, and to myself I will probably say, okay, I'm only going to include articles that actually are quantitative studies that have measured loneliness and have measured depression using a reliable and valid tool. Some of these will screen out when I go through that process. And so that's just an example of how I would limit a lit review without going too far. I've only got scholarly articles with those 2 words as subject terms, with adults as 65 and older. Those are my only limits. And 250 abstracts, that's not too much to read. If I read 5 or 6 a day. If you can't get the full text article, order it and go from there. So some of these will quickly screen out because they won't be quantitative studies. They'll be just other things, maybe clinical papers that people are writing about the topic, and so it's classed as a subject term for that reason. So I have found that if you limit by method, what happens is if you go over here and you try to set the limit for method, unless I'm totally overwhelmed, I won't set it by method, because when you go to method, here's what happens. You can have all these different methods, and some are embedded in the others. So if you pick too many, you lose articles. And if you don't pick enough, you're still reading a lot of abstracts. Like if I say I only want quantitative studies, then I think to myself, okay, but longitudinal studies are quantitative studies too, and I'm never sure if I'm going to get all those longitudinal studies in that 176 quantitative studies. I should, but I'm not sure if I do. And prospective studies can be quantitative, so I'd still end up reading 200 and some articles, 200 and some abstracts probably to do the lit review that I want to do. So that's an example of that. Does anyone have any questions? I'm glad to help you do searching, help you look for your subject terms, anything I can do to help you move forward if you're currently writing a paper. Anybody? I know you're doing a sports paper. Do you have any questions or anything I can do to help you with your work? Okay. So. That is a good question. So yeah, look down here. So look, it tells you down here. You can check your databases down here at the bottom. Okay, so I can figure that out. Here's the thing though. If you add these numbers up, this is like my initial results, I believe, after limiting to scholarly peer reviewed. Okay, so it does it. Now I'm down to 256, and it's not really telling me, right? I think there's a way to find it out in here. If I click on this, I might be able to find out on individual articles. That's a lot of work to do that, to go and figure out, psych info, okay? So if I click on the individual article, I can figure out what database brought it to me. So, yeah. which is interesting too, right? And then you know it came from the psychology literature, if you know which database it came from. So.
Then my second question is, if you go EBSCOhost, does it go to the full database or just certain articles in the database?
No, as far as I know at our library, EBSCOhost goes to the full database. And that is the main way, actually, that the librarians recommend searching. And then if you also look in some of your newer texts, I have a newer text on systematic review for clinical doctoral students. They suggest going through this very first one when I was talking about this Academic Search Complete. That's what they suggest. Go to Academic Search Complete and then choose your databases. So. Now remember, it doesn't go to, on those initial slides though, it doesn't cover your databases. Like you can't go there and pick Cochrane or Joanna Briggs or any of those, the ones that publish the past reviews. Okay, so you still have to do that as an individual search to see if there's a past review. Those databases, like the Cochrane database is separate in the library site. Yeah. So, yeah. And then of course you could find, it is entirely possible that you could find different literature on Google Scholar, because in order for an article to be retrieved from this site through EBSCOhost, it has to be indexed in one of those databases, right? Like, for example, the dissertations might not be indexed yet. That would be ProQuest. You know, you might find articles that were published in, for example, an open access newer journal that currently isn't being indexed in these databases. So that's why I kind of add Google Scholar in there, because what will happen is if someone has a publication, they'll add it to their Google Scholar profile, or it'll automatically get added from an open access journal, but it might not be indexed in one of these databases. So, yet. Hopefully it will be, but maybe it isn't yet. So that's what I have on searching the literature. I think it's pretty straightforward, and there's a lot of resources there. So it's really just a matter, like we talked about, using that PRISMA guideline of walking yourself through the steps and making sure you have time to do it.